Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. I'm pleased to welcome Mayor Jan Vapaavuori of Helsinki today for this edition of Global Conversations. Welcome, Mayor. This is a series of informal conversations with local leaders from around the world who are committed to advancing social and environmental progress in the face of COVID-19 and other global pressures. I'm Tony Pippa. I'm a senior fellow in global economy and development at the Brookings Institution. And we're really pleased to have you today, Mayor, with us. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Tony, for your kind words. This is a real pleasure and honor for me to have this opportunity to have hopefully a lively and good discussion.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. And just a reminder to our audience, those of you who registered beforehand, the chat is open for your comments and questions. We ask that you remain respectful and succinct. And I think what I would also say is if you have a question, remember that a question ends in a question mark. So, Mayor, thanks for sharing your time and thoughts with us today. Just before we get too much into your leadership and where Helsinki is going, you know, I think it's good for our viewers to have a little background of even just sort of the governance structures. There's lots of variation across the world and how governance structures work at the local level and how they're organized. You were elected in 2017, the first mayor of Helsinki after the abolition of the position of city manager of Helsinki. So tell us a little bit about what is the role and responsibilities of the mayor of Helsinki and how Helsinki is organized in its local structures and governance.
I do think that the big picture is that I'm a mayor like most of the mayors all around the world in today's world. I'm leading the city, but of course then I have the city council who have the absolute power, of course. I think actually we used to be a quite different city or country because we didn't have this kind of mayor position, elected mayors, but in today's world we are like more or less any city in the world. What, however, makes our system in not only in Helsinki but in most cities in Finland quite unique is that in our city administration structure we do not have any governing coalition and an opposition. So in our system, all parties who gain some relevant amount of support in the elections, they will also be elected to the city board. So we have all parties with any kind of relevant support in the city board, and we don't have any government opposition structure at all, which leads to a system where you try to find a consensus with not maybe all the parties, but at least the major parties all the time. And when you are not able to do that, it can differ from case to case which parties find themselves in a majority in a single issue.
Okay, that's
I know
helpful.
it sounds very odd. It has some strengths. I mean, the strength is that from election to election, maybe the big line or the goal of the city do not change that much. You can be quite sure that the next government will more or less follow the big projects the former government have tried to take forward. But then the weakness is maybe that it leads to a world where you are a little bit risk averse, where you try to find in most cases a solution where if not all but most of the parties can join.
Well, let's talk a little bit about, you were just saying about sort of how the priorities could continue to move forward even from administration to the administration. But let's talk about the priorities of your tenure. You've led the city through the creation and launch of a strategy and to make Helsinki, as you call it, the most functional city in the world. Now that's a strong ambition. Tell us a bit, what does that mean? Like, how do you describe that? And then how does that become concrete for Helsinki and its residents and its citizens?
When I was elected, my starting point was that Helsinki is a great city, and all the former mayors and city managers and city councils had made a quite good job. We are one of the leading cities in the world, whatever criteria you choose. And my point was that what I wanted to do was to like raise the level of ambition, a little bit like modernize the city. And I did not see any like major need or crucial need for any major changes. But what I thought was crucial for us was to raise the level of ambition and pay more attention to marketing, pay more attention to international collaboration in a city, in a world which is changing more and more rapidly all the time, and where the competition is tougher all the time. When I started to think about the topic of our strategy, I mean, what first crossed my mind was that I wanted to make Helsinki the greenest or like most sustainable city in the world. But to be honest, I think that Copenhagen had reserved that topic already. And we had not a shortage of like cities in the world which had tried to profile themselves as the greenest cities in the world or among them. Then my next idea was that for Helsinki, it's important to be sustainable, but it's also important to be smart, and we are certainly among the smartest cities in the world. But then I found that even there, we don't have a shortage of cities which try to profile themselves as smart cities, and maybe Singapore is leading in that field. So what I wanted was to like create something unique, some like word, some profile, which certainly no city in the world had taken before us. And even if I think still today that profiling a city as the most functional city in the world is maybe not that media sexy, I think it's really relevant. It's relevant for our citizens. It's relevant for our business society. It's relevant for our visitors and tourists and so on. And actually, what I think that in a COVID-19 world, and especially in a post-COVID world, it's even more relevant than it's today. What we mean with the most functional city is that it is a system which simply works. You could say that if you put it like in a nutshell, it is a city where people can spend their time in something productive, whatever, or something fun, whatever they will prioritize, instead of spending their time in queues, in traffic, or in the bureaucracy, or wheresoever. A city with a comprehensive approach, holistic view, being clean, safe, well organized. What we also state in the city strategy, and this is maybe one way of defining what we mean with a most functional city in the world. It is a city with many strengths and few weaknesses.
I think it's interesting to hear you talk about like the thought process of what is that identity, you know, trying on different words and different identities, because I think it's so elegantly simple. Like you say, it simply works. And as a former athlete, you know, I feel like it's like being in the flow. Like, as you say, you know, you're not sitting in traffic, or if you go for city services are delivering what they're meant to deliver. If you're engaging with city government, it's efficient, it's effective. But yet I think it also denotes some of those other attributes you were just talking about around
Absolutely.
sustainability and around being green and around, actually being viable for the future and future generations. And as you say, it's actually operationally even more important in a COVID-19 era as well.
Yeah, and I think that
Um,
it's like you can, a successful city is in today's world, it need to be sustainable, it need to be smart, it need to be resilient, and so on and so on. And I actually think that all these attributes are like incorporated in the idea of being functional. So you can't be truly functional without being truly smart. You can't be truly
uh-huh.
functional without being truly sustainable, resilient, and so on.
Yeah. Well, I want to get into actually your commitment around the Sustainable Development Goals and that idea of sustainability. But before I do so, just I see a question from our viewing audience that really speaks to a little bit of the governance we were just talking about. So, and just a question about. Tell us a little bit about the power relationship between cities and the national government in Finland and any other intermediary governments as well. I know that Helsinki, for example, is quite important to the overall economic growth of Finland overall. But tell us just a little bit about the relationship in between those governance structures.
As you know, Helsinki is the capital of Finland, and Finland is one of the Nordic countries. And of course, the starting point is that we are a capital of a so-called welfare state, which means that the responsibilities, the range of responsibilities of the city is very wide. So we actually are in charge of you could say all public services in the society in a country where the range of public services is the widest in the whole world, and we are responsible for all of those except universities, police, and army. So we are, and this maybe illustrates the power of the city, that the city of Helsinki is the biggest employer in the whole country. And
Wow.
we stand for all education except universities. We stand for all healthcare, all social care, cultural activities, and then of course issues like urban planning, traffic, and so on. And you could say that in this sense, we are a more powerful city, and we have a wide range of responsibilities than maybe any city in the whole world. But then what we are missing, what most cities in the world have, is that we miss a legislative like power. So in the Finnish system, I mean, all legal bills comes from the government and from the state.
Okay.
And what this mean in practice is of course that even in our system, the relation between the national government and bigger cities is a difficult one.
Uh-huh. So you were actually just talking about the wide range of services and actually even the wide range of sectors in terms of public administration that you touch on and that you're responsible for. And that's actually a good segue into our conversation around sustainability and sustainable development. And I know that Helsinki was the second city in the world after New York City and first city in Europe to report voluntarily to the UN on the Sustainable Development Goals. You've become a leader in the region in encouraging other cities to commit to sustainable development. You even co-hosted a conference with one of the UN offices to help cities from around the world think about how to report on what their progress on sustainability is like. Why this commitment to sustainable development and the SDGs? And how would you describe to other city leaders the benefits that Helsinki gets, that you get as a leader in a government, but also that your citizens get from from reviewing progress like this and focusing on the attributes of sustainable development?
Um, it may be that the Paris Agreement on climate is the best well-known global agreement in today's world, but still I think that the UN SDG agreement is more important, and at least it's more comprehensive. What I think is the biggest reason or explanation behind a truly successful city or country or whatsoever in today's world is that you really have a truly comprehensive approach, a really holistic view, and actually the sustainable development goals just underlines this idea. For a city in today's world, or a mayor in today's world, the closest collaboration or friend or whatsoever you can have is another city, another mayor somewhere else in the world. And the idea of what was originally an idea of the city of New York to create the voluntary local review where cities report to United Nations about their success in the field of SDGs, like gives the cities in the world a common language, a common platform, a common maybe way of reporting of their both successes and maybe failures, which I think in the long run should help all the cities all around the world to better learn from each other. So even if we are living in a world where you have a unlimited amount of all kind of information everywhere, you still need a common platform, a common language in order to really be able to benchmark yourself with other cities and learn from each other. And I think that that is maybe the like biggest wisdom behind the voluntary local review concepts. Then of course it's also for us ourselves a way to really study how good we are or are we, how advanced we are or aren't we, where are our biggest strengths and where are our weaknesses, in order of course to really remind ourselves of the importance of a comprehensive approach, of the fact that actually everything matters.
So tell us a couple of, what are the kinds of things you're doing to advance your priorities that fit within the SDGs? I know you've launched, for example, the Helsinki Energy Challenge. Tell us a little bit about that and maybe a couple of other things that you're doing. And then I want to transition a little bit into COVID as well and what you've had to do. But before we do that, just what are some of the key initiatives that you see that are important to the city that really fit within the SDGs in your work that you've been doing on being the most functional city and then being one that's so committed to sustainable development?
We have committed ourselves to become carbon neutral by 2035. It's a quite ambitious goal. I know that you have some bigger cities in the world which are even more ambitious, but still among the most ambitious cities in the world. We also have a quite good track record so far. So our emissions today are 28% lower than they used to be in 1990. And actually, the achievement is even more, say, impressive because the city has grown all the time. So per capita, our emission level is 45% lower than it was in 1990. But still, we are like only halfway. And in our case, the biggest challenge, I know that in most American cities, traffic and transportation is the biggest challenge. But for us, in our climate circumstances, the biggest challenge is heating the city. And in today's world, more than half of all of our emissions, they come from the heating, and there more than 50% is due to the reason that we still utilize coal in heating the city. And in order to really become carbon neutral, then of course we need to get rid of coal. And now we have committed ourselves to get rid of coal by 2029. We still have 2 big power plants run by coal. And now the question is how to do that in a truly sustainable way. And in today's world, we do not have any clear answer to that question. We know that some other Nordic cities have replaced coal by biomass, but I do think that burning biomass is not a truly sustainable way of heating a city in the future. And now the Helsinki Energy Challenge is a project where we invite the whole world to help us to solve the issue of replacing coal in heating the city of Helsinki, and promising a €1 million prize for the winner. And there, of course, our idea, first of all, is to help ourselves to get rid of coal. But inviting the whole world in helping us, I'm quite convinced that we will also get a lot of ideas which are maybe not relevant for us, but maybe for some other cities. So what I think is what makes this challenge genius is that at the same time we can help ourselves to become more sustainable, and also as a small city contribute for the rest of the world, or at least some other cities to do the same. And I'm especially glad that really big, say, ambitious, well-known cities like Toronto have partnered with us in this challenge.
So that's wonderful, and it's wonderful to create sort of a marketplace of ideas around this, basically. So, and it benefiting Helsinki, but also, as you say, will benefit other cities and also the field of thinking about how to approach these problems.
I also think that, let me interrupt for a second, that and this is part of my typical pitch as a mayor of the city of Helsinki, that Helsinki is an ideal test bed for demonstrations and pilots of systemic level. So when you need to test or demonstrate an innovation on a systemic level, you need a city which is big enough to be called a city, but at the same time, which is maybe small enough and functional enough in order to make that demonstration feasible. And the Helsinki Energy Challenge is for us only one example of that.
So again, a nice manifestation and reflection of that drive to be the most functional city. Before we move into COVID-19, I'm also seeing another question just from our viewers around actually the SDGs and whether there were, I mean, did you have to make some organizational reforms or changes to adapt to how the city strategy aligns with the SDGs and implements the SDGs, or was it really more of a was it something that came together actually quite nicely because you had already been thinking about and focusing on some of these issues?
I think that, and this goes not only for Helsinki, but also for several other Nordic European countries and cities, that we have aimed to be truly sustainable in a comprehensive way already a long time before the member states of United Nations agreed of the Sustainable Development Goals. So you could say that for us, it was maybe the question of the latter.
Okay, that's helpful. So come in, got your city strategy, focused on being functional, focused on sustainable development. All of a sudden now COVID-19 hits. Tell us a little bit about the city's response and what you've had to do in response to COVID-19, and how it's tested, or actually how you relied upon the work that came before to be able to help you through that particular time and the crisis of the pandemic.
The pandemic hit Helsinki as well. It was not at all as serious as it was or is in most other European or American cities, but still in Helsinki alone we had close to 3,000 cases and 160 death casualties. So we were not immune for that pandemic, but still compared to more or less any city of our size, except maybe Oslo and some other cities which did it quite well as well, the amount of cases and casualties was still quite moderate. And of course we used more or less same kind of methods and restrictions and lockdowns like most other cities in the world. But why we managed better than most of the others was that, first of all, we were a little bit maybe lucky because we are located quite far away from the say even Central Europe, so we had more time to prepare ourselves than some other cities and countries which were hit by the pandemic first. But then I think the big reason why we were so successful is that people in Helsinki, they followed all restrictions. And that is based to, I think, maybe the single most important strength of the Helsinki and the whole Finnish society is trust. So the fact that we have a society based on trust, where people trust each other, they trust the government, they trust authorities, they trust that if the government, whether it's the national or city government, come with some orders or restrictions or recommendations, that they are like serious and they need to be followed. And you could say that we did not innovate anything special in our response to COVID different from other cities, but we were more successful because people followed what we asked them to do.
So I think that's it's a powerful reflection about trust and about the importance of trust in governance, as well as to what that's meant for the response and the success of the response. And having said that, even though, you know, the health impacts have been moderate, comparatively speaking, I'm presuming you're also feeling economic impact. And I'm wondering, just as you think about, you know, the medium term and the long term, has it changed at all the way in which you're thinking of the future and economically how you're thinking about where Helsinki needs to be positioned, or how has it affected that long-term strategy and thinking, if at all? And it may not have done it at all.
Before I was elected the mayor of Helsinki, I spent 3 years as the Minister of Economy in Finland. And I'm very well aware of the fact that Finland, as a relatively small country with relatively small own natural resources, is extremely dependent on international trade. And you could say that even if we had been able to limit the case, the amount of COVID positive cases to zero in Finland, we would have been hit seriously economically, because we are that dependent on what happens in the rest of the world. So yes, the COVID has hit both the city of Helsinki and the Finland, not as seriously as some other countries, but I think still it is a huge problem for us. Then of course we are a city, and you could say that the definition of a city is that a city is a place where people meet each other. They spend time with each other. They go to events. They go to restaurants. And of course, this was forbidden or
Uh-huh.
just impossible in our city as well as it is in all other countries or all other cities. And even in the city of Helsinki, tourism plays a quite big role in our um, economy. So you could say that from a health perspective, we are in a much better position than most of the other cities. But from an economic point of view, the situation is more or less the same. And of course, we spend a lot of time in thinking that how to recover, how the world will look like after COVID. Will we see a world after COVID, or will we have a long period of time where we will have some cases? And there, our or my first and maybe most um, uh, like first idea is that I do believe that in the post-COVID world, those kind of strengths we have had even before to be a safe, a clean, a society based on trust, a sustainable, a functional city, those are values which will be appreciated even more in the future. But still, uh, I don't know when we will have the same amount of tourists we had in February, or will we? Or when we are able to organize all those events for our own residents, which they love to have. And what are the economic implications of the fact that this is not the case at the time being, and not in the near future either?
Yeah. Yeah, that uncertainty around, to your point, cities are places that benefit from people congregating, people sharing
Yeah.
culturally, people being together, and that uncertainty around when, to what extent you'll be able to do that on a regular basis with a feeling of safety and security, and how that will work, and how to adapt to an environment where now it's become a little bit of a question mark in the back of people's minds when they do that. So that will be something that I think you and many other cities and city leaders around the world will have to be facing and dealing with as we move forward out of this. Um,
This is a huge challenge for the whole mankind. This is a huge challenge for most of the countries and most of the cities all around the world. And what we see today is that we are all members of the same mankind, and how interconnected the world is, and how something which happens somewhere impacts all of us. But then at the same time, you also need to remember that there is not a single decision, there is not a single big transformation in the world history where some countries, some corporations, some cities would not have come out from even stronger than they used to be. So it's now you need to understand to be optimistic, you need to be positive, you need to like um, innovate, put resources to research and development, try to find out what the world maybe could look like, and be among the forerunners, like creating, like understanding and even creating the world and life we will see after COVID.
Well, that your points though about sort of the interconnectedness of the world and us being, similar and connected. I mean, that also leads me to a question, and something that we've talked a lot about here in the conversations we've had around your connections with other cities around the world and inside city networks and cooperating with cities. You talked about even the work that you've done on the voluntary local review being a common language so that you can exchange with other cities around the world, and signing up to the declaration that New York had put out to be able to exchange what you're doing with others. Talk to us a little bit about Helsinki drawing on its local and international networks for collaboration, and And what role do you see for cities in addressing and solving global problems through that kind of global cooperation?
What we saw in the world after the oil crisis in the 70s was that there was a huge amount of innovation in the field of energy efficiency. What we saw after the financial crisis was that there was a huge amount of innovation within the field of fintech and also bank regulation and so on. What we will see as a result of the COVID is a huge amount of innovation research in the field of both health technology, but also like digitalization in a,
Uh-huh.
as a big, and I do believe that where you should really concentrate is the issue of how to make the quantum leap in the field of digitalization. And there we also see and why I'm telling this is that this is also a field where we as a city were active already before the COVID-19. So we do believe that our strategies and our vision is that we will move to a more proactive city in the field of services, for example, in the healthcare. Already in today's world, we have that much data that combining that in a clever way, we could be more proactive vis-a-vis our residents. But then we end up with some really difficult issues of for example, concerning the ethical use of data. And there we started a project together with the cities of London and Amsterdam, and I think Barcelona and New York, where the cities who really are working at the grassroots level, who see maybe the opportunities of new digital technologies, but also the challenges, get together in order to try to solve them, or at least in order to get an idea how you could solve them in order to then try to persuade our governments to make the necessary legislative measures. So yes, I do believe that we will see more and more this kind of collaboration with forerunning cities in the world, trying to solve or at least contribute to the solving of some really tricky issues. And this is like an example of a network of some advanced cities. Then we also have bigger networks like the network which Bloomberg Philanthropies is running, which I think is extremely useful for hundreds of cities in the world where mayors have a common platform and opportunity and possibility to talk to each other. Other networks run by World Economic Forum and so on. So yes, you could even say that we are living in a world where cities are networking and trying to network and partner with each other a little bit in the same way than national states did 100 years ago. We don't need the like say end structure maybe yet. We don't know what of the networks will be the most powerful, which we will have even in 5 or 10 or 15 years. But there's a extremely big need and interest for closer collaboration between cities. And now we have living in a time where cities are like trying different of those, and then let's see what the future bring with them.
Well, it is actually quite a dynamic and exciting time of cities collectively collaborating on important issues that are important not only to their local citizens and to the functionality of their own governments and what the services they're delivering to their people, but also are actually quite important and have really big implications for global issues. And I think that example that you talked about around digital, is a great example of how cities can be partners in problem solving and creating the norms and creating the standards that are going to be necessary for national governments and global organizations and global institutions to be nimble and thinking about. But because you're actually sort of the closest level of government to citizens as well, I mean, you provide a particular perspective and a particular voice on what the impact is going to be of some of these issues.
Yes, I agree. I think there are several reasons why the role and importance of cities is growing in the world. Of course, the urbanization itself is one. The other
Right.
one is that it has become clear that cities are in many cases even more committed in solving globally pressing problems. I think, of course, the best well-known example is the case of the American president withdrawing the nation from the Paris Agreement. And what happened was that tens and then hundreds of American mayors stood up in telling that they are still committed to that. And I think that actually, and at least from a European perspective, it was not a surprise that a huge amount of mayors disagree with the president, but it was maybe some kind of surprise that it really mattered. And what we found out was that actually the toolkit cities have even in solving globally pressing problems is in some cases, if not as relevant, but maybe as relevant even than the toolkit of the national states. And then, of course, the biggest strength of the cities maybe is that they have a much more natural contact and dialogue with the people than states ever can have.
Yeah, so that's and it's interesting to hear your perspective, also having been in the national government, like you said, in
Yeah.
roles in the ministerial role at the Department of at the Economics Ministry, and I think what we're seeing is an evolution of how cities and city collaboration and cooperation can influence what global government, like the traditional global governance systems that we have together, which frankly are, the members are national governments, not local governments. And so this dynamic of how to create a collective urban voice or city voice that can influence those particular institutions and those norms, I think we'll see a lot of that sort of activity over the next 5 to 10 years because the issues are pressing and also affecting just people where they live as well. So
I think it has been actually quite interesting to find out that now as a mayor, I think that yes, the Finnish government is a quite relevant actor from my point of view because they have a huge impact of the say general working environment where we are living. But then the mayor of Stockholm or mayor of Amsterdam or mayor of London is a much more interesting discussion partner in order to find out what to do in the future.
Well, let me just end with one question because I know that Helsinki was in a recent ranking named the happiest city in the world. And so how does something like that affect, you and the leadership that you're providing to the city, but also just the identity of the city and what does it mean to the citizens? Like, what is the good life in Helsinki, and what is it like to be in those particular rankings as well?
I don't know whether our residents actually agree that they are the most happy people in the world or not. But I think that actually it is it's maybe a proof of the comprehensive approach we have. The fact that we have a lot of strengths and then we actually have a quite few weaknesses. I mean, compared to other cities in the world, that actually on the city level, everything matters, everything counts, and then also it is a proof of the importance of trust. We are living in a quite, say, scary world where people are afraid. They understand that more or less anything can happen, more or less any day. A pandemic can change everything. They are afraid of geopolitical issues and many issues. And there, that you can trust each other, you can trust your neighbor, you can trust your government, you can trust your authorities, I think is a something which you have not understand how valuable it actually is. And I think that when you talk about happiness, it is in many cases like not a case of happiness in the way we used to think that world, but it's also a issue of lack of unhappiness.
Well, those pillars that you just talked about around trust, around a holistic perspective, has made, and the leadership and cooperation with other cities, those have made you quite a valuable member of the SDG Leadership Cities Network that we've been facilitating at Brookings. And so I want to thank you for your leadership and your real participation in that. It's been extremely beneficial and helped create a really strong learning environment for the cities around the world who have been participating. And I want to thank you for our conversation today. It's been a rich conversation. I'm sorry that it's our time is up, so we have to draw it to a close. But thank you very much for sharing your time and your reflections with us today. And we wish you all the best, and Helsinki all the best as we move forward out of this pandemic and move into creating greater sustainability and inclusion as a society going forward. So thanks very much for spending some time with us today.
Thank you, Tony. Personally, and also for Brookings Institution, I think that you play a very important role in like building the new architecture of cities worldwide, and you are doing a really valuable job. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. And please join us next week. Next Thursday, I'll be having a similar conversation with Mayor Claudia Lopez of Bogota. And we'll look forward to your comments and questions then. But thanks, Mayor, and
Thank you.
And all best wishes. And thanks to all of you. We're just signing off.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos from Brookings.